If you're a gamer, you've probably heard the whole Sony and PlayStation debacle already, and while initially I found the entire discourse a little bit irrelevant, at least to me, the more I sat with it, the deeper that rabbit hole became. The story has in fact gotten serious enough that gamers are organizing a 7-day console blackout from August 23 to the 30th, and the hashtag blackout boycott calls for fellow gamers to log out of their accounts, turn off their consoles, and freeze all purchases on PlayStation platforms. So what exactly caused the gaming community to crash out? So let's walk it back to figure it out. How I saw it is that Sony was pulling a Maricondo and wanted to declutter. And that concept is great. You're physically decluttering your home, you're curating your space, less stuff, more freedom. And honestly, I can buy into that. I want the clean lines, the digital libraries, the clutter-free life. But here's the thing. While we were busy digitizing our bookshelves and streaming our favorite films, we weren't just clearing out the junk drawer. I know it sounds dramatic, but think about every single online subscription we have that frees up quote-unquote real estate space on our bookshelves. We no longer own those collections. We are signing a lease. And it turns out, the landlord just decided to burn down the library. Sony isn't killing the physical disc. They're finalizing our transition from owners to permanent tenants. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lo-Fi-Apocrypha, where we talk about things that aren't that deep until they actually are. I'm your host, Mom Chalant, and today I want to talk about the doomsday cult of scheduled obsolescence and why the cryptid is very, very concerned about who exactly gets to decide what art is allowed to survive and, more importantly, in what format. I get the appeal, truly. I love a clean apartment as much as the next person, but when we traded physical media for digital convenience, we didn't account for the power shift. We thought we were curating our collection. We were actually just curating our access. Chapter 1: The Subscription Tenant. The philosophical question is fantastic. It's not, should Sony do this? But rather, what does it actually mean to own something in the digital age? Now that's huge, because it isn't just games anymore. This didn't start with Sony. It began with Steam in 2003. And then it was Kindle in 2007. Netflix has been around since 1997 as a mail-order DVD rental service, and their promotion of no late fees was the last nail in Blockbuster's coffin. 2007, they began digital streaming. In 2008, Spotify debuted, and according to the Atlanta Institute of Music and Media, it revolutionized the music industry by shifting consumer habits from ownership to on-demand streaming. December 2019, Disney made that power move and launched Disney Plus, touted to make it the perfect hub for fans to easily access Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic. That's the Mickey Mouse explanation, but it doesn't take a business analyst to piece together that this was to ensure absolute control over distribution of their intellectual property without having to lease it to other parties like Netflix or Prime Video. We've been training ourselves to be comfortable with revocable access. It's giving dependency. And we're just guests in our own digital homes now. People increasingly purchase access, not property. For centuries, ownership meant, I own the thing. But now ownership increasingly means, I have permission. Gang, those are radically different concepts. Now, this is gonna sound funny, but walk with me here. We don't ask a bookshelf for permission to reread a novel. A cartridge doesn't need authentication. And a DVD doesn't send an email reminding you of the recurring billing cycle in 2 days. Now, a digital license, however, is only as permanent as the company that issued it. You don't own the game, the book, the songs on Spotify regardless of payment. You're just borrowing it. And to me, that's some existential dread right there. Chapter 2. The Librarian of Babel. Historically and socially, the librarian is a guardian of knowledge. In today's episode, though, the librarian is the premier marketing department. And guess what? Marketing departments don't care about preservation. They care about SEOs, the algorithm, and quarter-over-quarter growth. If a digital game is dead content, or if the server costs are too high, they don't just close the book. They can erase it from existence. They get to decide what stays and what goes based on profit margins, not on if you're attached to a particular series. Now let's pivot back to Sony. This PlayStation move is the end game we've been prepped for. For what, almost 2 decades at this point? It's not about convenience. It's about creating a closed loop, a permanent dependency on the PlayStation Store. No retail competition, no secondhand market. You don't own the game. You own a permission slip that can be revoked by a terms of service update 3 a.m. on a Tuesday if they want to. Chapter 3. Who remembers us? Now here is the cosmic stove we are touching. If all our culture from this generation are games, music, books, movies, if it lives on their servers, then history becomes whatever they decide to keep. Not to be cynical, but it wasn't enough for them to own our personal data. They need to monopolize even our sources of entertainment. Are you guys seeing a pattern here? We cannot archive a culture when there's a higher power that holds the delete key. According to recent data, US physical video game sales hit a 30-year low in 2025, falling to roughly $1.5 billion, while total consumer spending on games escalated to $60.7 billion US dollars. Physical media now represents a tiny, shrinking sliver of a massively expanding market. So chat, tell me what happens when the landlord switches to a new business model and decides our curation of this era's culture no longer has a place to stay anymore. Video games are art. Physical media has historically preserved films, music, books, software. When something only exists in a cloud, I don't know, again, it just isn't the same, and I currently don't have the brain power to come up with an argument for it other than vibes. It's a much bigger discussion than I like game cartridges. Conclusion. The Library of Alexandria did not burn in one night under the conquest of Julius Caesar in 48 BC, but that did signal the beginning of a very long, drawn-out, sad end. Aurelian and then Diocletian pointedly furthered the collapse of the library between 272 to 297 AD with their own Mediterranean campaigns centuries after Caesar. Well, it's comparing a molehill to a mountain when we talk about the digitizing of our cultural highlights. The pattern is still there. Think about it. Libraries were never neutral. There was always someone who decided what deserved preserving, what deserved copying, and most importantly, what could disappear into the ether. The difference today is, instead of emperors or monks or regimes, it's terms of service. That's an incredibly unsettling realization, because think about it. A Roman vexillion still exists. Illuminated medieval manuscripts still exist. a vinyl record of the first ever single the Beatles sang in Liverpool, you can still play that. But what happens when an entire generation's artistic output exists only behind servers owned by companies whose legal obligation is to maximize shareholder value? No, not because they're evil, because that is literally their job. If preserving a game costs more than deleting it, what do you think's gonna happen? On the surface, the corporations are architecting digital ecosystems, but underneath, they're also constructing voids, places where history can simply vanish, not with fire or censorship, just the server shutdown, because the disks no longer exist. If culture no longer has a physical body, who is responsible for remembering it? As usual, the universe stays complicated, the questions don't totally get answered, and our little cryptid is rightfully concerned. Thanks for hanging out with me while I process the existential dread behind this PlayStation situation. Thank you for tuning into Lo-Fi Apocrypha. I'm your host, Mom Chalan, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!